Folks, welcome to another episode of Better You. Today, I know I'm always very excited of doing episodes, but today I'm extremely excited because I have a new friend which I made recently. Her name is Andrea. She's a founder and executive coach at Awesome Institute. I think the name is itself is very exciting. Awesome Institute. Um, Andrea and I, we had a coffee in person in San Francisco. We talked about a lot of good ideas. And this is where I started stalking her. I said, hey, I really need you to be on my show. And let's talk about some really interesting topics. So before we go into the context of this episode, I just want to say there's a very high probability that you folks, audience, may start seeing Andrea more and more on my show because I have a lot of stuff to learn from her. And we were just bouncing some ideas. And then we came up with the idea that, hey, how about we talk about the work culture? How about we talk about relationship building professional and friendly relationship at work and drawing a line, what to say, what not to say, how to say it, and how to address conflict and many other things. So I really want you folks to stick around and until the end to see what Andrea has to say on those topics. And of course, as we unwrap this conversation, I'm going to share more insights from my side based on my personal experiences without mentioning anybody's name. So, Andrea, excited to have you here. Would love to understand what you're doing at Awesome Institute. Just give us some introduction about yourself.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. So I'm an executive coach. I've been doing this for about 11 years. Before that, I ran a couple of different tech companies. So I work with mostly C-suite, but senior leaders at different levels and help them to grow as leaders and as people. So the kind of work that we do is called developmental coaching. And so really we're looking at, like if I was coaching you, I'm looking at who you are as a person, what's working in your life, what's working in your work, what's not working, what kinds of things you feel like could be different, or maybe you've gotten some feedback. And then we really look at your whole life to help you grow in very specific, observable ways. We write a program, we work through those things together over a period of time together. And then at the end of the year, you've got those permanent skills and you go forth into the world and do the things you want to do, like stop
Nice,
people or
nice,
whatever.
nice. I love it. Okay. Um, interesting stuff that you just mentioned, and I'm sure you have gone through so many experiences with so many people as part of your coaching. And I think there's always a confusion when it comes to a work relationship. And when I say work relationship, that more about that I love my coworker in a way that I want to work with them and I want to collaborate more. But then there is always a very thin line, and this is coming from personal experience, always a very thin line where you don't want to cross that line because then confusion occurs, right? So the way I want to start this discussion, uh, focusing on the importance of relationships at work, right?
Mhm.
Personally, for me, when I join a new job or I work with the new teams, um, trust is very important. And it takes time to build trust. And what I have learned looking at people and also at, as I look more into myself, I trust people and let them break the trust, and then I walk away when they break the trust. But there are people where they don't trust on day one. They test people and then they build the trust. So I think what I want to talk to you about, start this episode, when it comes to relationship at work, what do you think? How important is it to have a work relationship?
I mean, I think it's super important. We have evolved to live in tribes where the people in your tribe are taking care of you, you're taking care of them, you're watching out for each other, you're taking care of each other's kids, you're sharing food, you're doing all these things. But we're living in this world where you're doing PowerPoint presentations or you're doing sales pitches or whatever that like is very different from sort of how we are as humans. And so we do these things like trying to establish trust or building relationships to try to get the modern world to work with how humans actually work. So all that to say, like relationships are super important and often more important than people think. So I am a little bit different. And what I usually recommend my clients do is start by giving people small opportunities to build trust from day one. So giving people a chance to say, I'm going to do this thing by this date, and then they do it, and they've earned a little bit of trust. And you're giving people, you want to give people like escalating opportunities to build trust. Usually what happens at a new job is somebody gets thrown in, they're supposed to just do things. And then if they screw it up, then they've lost trust, right?
Mhm.
Instead of saying, like, how can my onboarding plan for this team member help them to build trust with the entire team or anybody that they're interacting with over time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And, I think you highlighted something very important. You take the baby steps with a new hire or somebody starting building a relationship with, where you give them a chance to earn that trust because, I really like the idea. I think it was Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It's mentioned in the book, emotional deposits, right? You do small deposits, and when you screw up, when you make a mistake, you have enough to withdraw, so it totally makes sense. But I think there's a risky part to this conversation where especially for me, because I give you 100% trust on day one,
Mhm.
and I have gone through some bad experiences in the work culture setting where I trusted you 100%, but then you said something intentionally, unintentionally to somebody, and then that came back because under our trust circle of trust, I shared something with you as a friend, and this actually goes back to the topic which I really want to talk about, Netflix. Netflix mentioned something very important. We uh, I may say it's wrong, but the whole essence is we do not believe in family. We believe in teams. We believe in tribes, as you said. Uh, so, what's your take on the word that generally people, especially I noticed that early stage founders, when they want to bring top A players, top performers into the company, and when they struggle to hire people, they always talk about, hey man, you know what, come in, you're part of the family, you are like a co-founder, and so on and so on. But suddenly, as they scale up, scaling up process, bring new players into the picture, and they forget the person they were initially relying on as a lead magnet to bring people in. So, what is your take on family term in the work setting versus team?
Yeah, it's a really great point. I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, I think we have this desire to be part of a team that feels like a family or that is a family, right? And I think that does come from our like tribal days when most of the tribe was related to you in one way or another, right? Either through marriage or by blood or whatever. And so I feel like people have this craving, but in today's world, like I see talking about family as maybe not intentionally, but it can be kind of manipulative, right? Because wouldn't you do all this extra work for your family? Like we value you as a person. But when things get hard or if you don't perform, you're out.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's part of the deal, right? So I think it's maybe people have their hearts in the right place, but it can be misleading and people can really get their hearts broken around being treated more like a team member and less like family, right? And there are expectations that you have to do your job and you have to perform. There may be exceptions made in certain situations for people that have done a lot for the group for a long time, and maybe there's that sense of family. But ultimately, like I don't think it's true for really anybody. It just sounds nice and it feels good, but it's not really real.
No, you're absolutely correct. When I started my career, my first job in HR orientation in India, there was a very big multinational company. HR on the day one said that don't fall in love with your company because you don't know when your company will stop loving you.
Mm,
And I was so young. I think I was like 21-year old, and my first job, I didn't know what does it mean. Then as I started talking to more people, then I understood the word firing people. I said, "Wow, I thought you get a job and you're set for your whole life. I didn't
mm,
know the concept of firing." That's where it meant that if you don't deliver, sure, we are using, as you said, right? We are using the word family to attract this talent, but if you don't deliver, you are out. And if the true meaning of family, you don't really kick people out of your family unless they screw up something really big, right?
yes.
So misusing the word of family versus team is huge. And also, this is coming from my personal experience as part of the startup world, that the organizational debt these founders, these leaders, they carry as part of bringing a top performer, where they say you are a family, but then they don't deliver the meaning of the family itself. Eventually, what they see is a churn, right? And I think this is where the second part of this episode I want to talk to you about.
Wait, can I say one more thing first?
Yeah, please.
I do think that there can be sort of family relationships between people. So there are people that I've had to fire. There are people that have left my companies, or I've left, or for whatever reasons, and we still have a really close relationship. And so those relationships don't necessarily end when the performance ends. The relationship with the company might end. And as a leader, I'm sort of like responsible for the company, and they're responsible for their performance to the company. So it's almost like the company is like this third entity between the two of us, but we can still maintain a close relationship, friendship, maybe even familial relationship between the two of us. It just can't get complicated into the relationship between us and the company. Does that make sense?
100%. And you know what? I'm so glad you mentioned this, because the next topic, which I really want to talk to you about, is avoiding this emotional entanglement. Like, we are working together. Sure, we are good work friends. After work, we are friends. But let's say, I report to you or report to me, and I'm accountable to deliver something to you. Emotionally, as friends, we are working on some work stuff. Now, I think it's very important for audience to understand how to draw that line, how to stay emotionally detached, to avoid any confusion in the work setting. So, what is your take? Anything that you want to share from your side?
Yeah, so I actually disagree with not wanting to be emotionally entangled with employees or
Nice.
or other things or other people in the workplace. But I think that there's a reason that people do that, and it requires a lot of skills that most of us don't have in order to do it differently. So the standard thing is maybe be friendly with your employees, but not friends, right? You can be close, but you can't cross that line, because the idea is that you won't be able to do the tough thing, like hold people accountable, lay them off in hard times, fire them for performance issues or whatever, that you won't be able to do those things because you'll be too clouded by your emotional attachment, right? Like that's what most of us were taught coming up in business. What I think needs to happen in order to be emotionally close with somebody and still be able to do those things is you need to have emotional intelligence and emotional skills, and you need to have strong boundaries, right? You need to be able to say, like, hey, I really care about you as a person, and I really value our relationship, and this isn't working,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like we need to like get you some more support or help, or if you can't get your numbers to where they need to be, we're going to have to part ways. But okay, so to back up a little bit, what I see people do a lot, and there's like some books and literature and research to support this, is that when things start going poorly with people, whether it's a friend, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's an employee or even like a customer, when things start going wrong, we start to distance ourselves from that person. Oh, they did that thing again. Oh, the product didn't work again. Oh, I called them and they didn't give me like a great answer. They sort of like gave me the runaround or whatever, right? We start doing this. Oh, they were late to our coffee again. Oh, they, whatever, right? Making promises they can't keep. We start to create this distance so that we can eventually cut them off or hold a boundary, or like, hey, I switched to a new product, and I'm not going to feel that bad about it, right? Have you seen people?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've done this myself, right?
Yeah, and that's the word that we use, checking out, or I checked out, or he or she checked out. And then I think what you just said, the checked out is an umbrella term. Under that, I am going away from so and so person in the work setting because I don't like this person, or something happened, or delivered or not, or did not deliver something which I wanted, or gave me a criticism on my work, whatever the issue is. But you start checking out from that particular group or from person, and eventually the other person also noticed that behavior too. So
That's right. That's right. And I think it's a gradual process, and the checking out is somewhere in there where we kind of start to recognize like, oh, I'm getting close to the edge of what I can tolerate. But we actually initiate that process. And mostly we do it because we don't want to get hurt. We don't want to be sad. We don't want to be angry, whatever it is for our personality and our background that we don't want to have. Well, I'm not going to be that disappointed if I'm not going to have my heart broken by this person if being a little dramatic, but
Yeah.
there's some truth to it. If I'm the one that's pushing them away, like I can create that emotional distance, that detachment in order to like preserve my own emotions, right? I don't
Yeah.
want to feel bad. And we do a lot of things so that we don't feel bad.
Yeah.
It's not conscious typically, but there's a lot of things that people do. So as we get to know our emotions, and that's some of the work that I do with people, as we start to recognize our emotions, as we recognize other people's emotions, we can say, wow, every time I start to feel bad about this situation, sad, mad, whatever, I create a little more distance. What if I
Yeah.
could actually tolerate that feeling a little bit more and I could let something play out a little differently without creating distance? Maybe I could even go closer to that person. Like, hey, what's going on for you? Like your performance was great for a couple of years and lately it's been down. What's happening? And sometimes we
Yeah.
don't do that because we don't want to know, like, hey, my like father is, terminally ill, or, I'm having a hard time in my marriage or with my kids or whatever's going on, because then we're afraid, like, well, then I can't do the thing because I'll know too much. So we create more distance, right? And so
Yeah.
it takes a lot of emotional skill in order to like lean into that and say, like, hey, I really care about you. I want to know what's happening for you. How could we work together to make this situation better instead of the inevitable decline of leaning away? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
No, 100%. And, as we set the context for this episode, the relationships at work and defining the boundaries, Andrea, for next 20 minutes or so, I want to stay focused on three key points.
Mhm.
And emotional intelligence, you brought it up. I'm a huge fan of it. I think leadership starts with emotional intelligence. And the empathy is a second very important point to my heart, because if I know how you're feeling, generally how you're feeling, I can act on it in a very productive way. And the third important thing which I want to talk to you about is communication. And I strongly believe, and this is just my personal experience, that all these things falls under an umbrella term called psychology. Like how you think, how you can talk to your emotions, and then based on that, you can take care of the emotional intelligence, empathy, and communication. Now, you brought it up, emotional intelligence. I work with a lot of technical founders, and these founders, they have done an amazing job building a product, but they have zero to some experience on managing people. And I strongly believe that managing people does require a serious emotional intelligence. And for early founders who have zero experience in managing people, what will be your advice? How to elevate the skill set, and how not to make expensive mistakes where you were able to hire a lead magnet or able to hire a top A player, but he or she is going to leave just because you don't know how to manage this person.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one I see a lot. Like I see a lot of people dealing with this. And I actually work with them on emotional intelligence with every single one of my clients, whether they've been a CEO for 30 years or whether it's like their very first year doing it. So they're not alone. Everybody struggles with this. It's tough, right?
Yeah.
And today kids are learning this in school. Like my daughter is learning like all the emotional stuff that I'm teaching my clients
Nice.
in second grade. It's incredible, I think. So, okay, so one thing that people can do is learn to recognize their emotions and learn which emotions they tend to avoid. So, you can download a list of emotion words off the internet. I have one on my website, awesomeinstitute.com/emotions. And it's basically a list of all the basic words that you can feel. And they're often categorized into different sort of subgroups. And so what you can do is a couple times a day, say, how am I feeling in this moment? Or you can think back to something that happened a little earlier and name the emotion. So this is usually what I have people start with. So I'm thinking back to that meeting I had an hour ago, and it was really difficult. And I think about how I was feeling, and I was feeling frustrated. So I write it down in my journal or on a piece of paper or whatever. Feeling frustrated. How did I know? So that's another,
Mhm.
that's like the second question. How do I know I was frustrated? And then what did it feel like in my body? Like maybe my stomach hurt, or maybe my shoulders are tight, or something like that. That takes a while to get to know too. You're starting to connect your head, your heart, and your body. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is look back over your data over time, like every week or two, and say, where in the categories are my answers falling? So for me personally, I have a lot of contact with anger. I have a lot of contact with happier emotions, but I don't have a lot of contact naturally with sad emotions or fear emotions. It's just like it doesn't really register for me. It doesn't mean they're not happening in there, but they're not my go-to. And so everybody has one or two categories that are kind of not their go-to. So if you're
Mm.
not into conflict, the anger categories, you might not find any data in that area. And so then what that tells you is this is an area where I can grow. So maybe I need to learn how to be more comfortable with conflict. How do I start looking for those anger category emotions? And starting to develop that skill set. Because what we find is that if we don't feel these things, if we avoid feeling these things, even subconsciously, we're going to do all sorts of stuff to figure out how to not feel those things.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And do you think emotional intelligence and empathy somehow they're related to each other?
Yeah, for sure. I think empathy is like feeling what other people are feeling. And so
Yeah,
there's like a very direct version of like, I can tell you feel hopeful and excited. And like, I can feel some of that in me just from like being near you. And some of it is like, I can be with you in your feelings and sort of like be there with you. So if you're feeling really sad, I might not feel super sad, but I can be there with you and not try to cheer you up.
yeah. So, Andrea, emotional intelligence and empathy, those are very two important pillars of, I think, any human being outside of work for personal life also. It's very important. Let's say somebody's not aware of these two keywords, emotional intelligence and empathy. Somebody wants to start out, writing the emotion. I think I never practice it, but I'm going to start practicing it. Um, for example, in my case, I'm a very optimistic person. No matter if, let's say, something goes wrong, I'm always looking at the more optimism side. Okay, sure, let's figure this out. But there's emotion as growing up in India, different childhood. There's a fear emotion I'm very familiar with. There's a lot of fear emotions I go through, and every time I go through that emotion, I pay attention to it. What is this causing me the fear, right? Now, but there is a part of me where I want to elevate my way of thinking to address those emotions. Any book, anything that you recommend for the audience, which they can tap into and just start doing more self-study about their emotions.
Yeah, there's a couple of books. There's one called Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett. It's a really good one. I like it especially for men and for tech founders. It explains a lot about like why it matters and how to do it. Brene Brown's books are really great. She has one called Atlas of the Heart, and there's even a limited series on Netflix.
Nice.
If you don't feel like reading yet another book. And she actually walks through in almost like a talk show format about different emotions. She shows movie clips. It's really awesome. I
Nice.
recommend it. There's a lot of great books out there. I would say you can read about them, and that's fine if you want to understand, but you've got to practice. There's no substitute for like naming your emotions throughout the day. And then it will start to become more natural to you, and you'll be going through your day and you're like, wow, I feel angry. Wow, I feel sad. Wow, I feel excited. I feel optimistic, right? And you can start to cover the whole range of emotions, not just the ones that feel comfortable to you. And that's really important because if other people are experiencing emotions that you don't want to feel, you're going to do weird things to get them to stop because it's making you feel some kind of
You
way.
know, you are absolutely correct on this. I do want to share this story. So I was a backbencher in school. I was one of those kids. Hey, don't talk to the professor. Hey, don't talk to me. I will be okay. I've just marked my attendance. I'm here. So the point is, I always believed in self-study. Like, oh, I don't need anybody. I can just learn my own. And when I started experiencing these emotions of fear, I started watching more YouTubes and starting listening to more audios and so on. But it helped to some extent. But then, as soon as I started working with an executive coach, a life coach, it was a hockey stick growth for me because I want to highlight how important a human touch is, where you can talk to someone like you, and share what you're going through, and then other person as a human being, not human being is explaining the emotion where it's arising from or work with you, and then that helps a lot to come out of that little spiral of this emotions or black hole of emotions that we fall into. So I'm so glad you mentioned about those books. I'm going to check out the Brené Brown. And I think you folks are doing an amazing job on helping founders and others, understanding the emotions and elevating the game into leadership skills. One topic, very important, communication, right? I work with, as I mentioned, right, with a lot of early stage founders from different backgrounds, uh, and founders, they are amazing people. They launch their own product, and they go through their own journey of raising money, and sometimes that brings a lot of arrogance. And when the arrogance comes in, it's a whole different ball game because they don't want to show their fear. They don't want to show that they are afraid of something when you talk to them. And I think I do feel that I have a very strong emotional intelligence, that I can read the room. I can read the, I won't say I'm a psychic, but I can read the emotions of the people, sentiment, and either I will back off or I will just come forward and talk about that with some conflict. Um, so the question I have for you, when it comes to these leaders who are early stage startup leaders and trying to build teams, how important is a communication? How can they improve their communication with smart people where they don't lose them or they are able to hire them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important, right? And what you talked about is how your emotional intelligence can inform your communication. And I think that's exactly right. So if you don't have emotional intelligence, you don't know how you're feeling, you don't have the ability to connect so part of the reason we name it is it really connects our head with the rest of our nervous
Yeah.
system and our emotions. So if we can't do that, then our communication is like disconnected from emotion, which means we're just saying stuff that we found in a book and it doesn't really land with people because people make most of their decisions emotionally, right? You know that from sales trainings and things like that, right? That like they think they're making these logical decisions, but mostly they're making emotional decisions backed up with logic and other sorts of things. So when you're communicating to your team and you're not able to connect in an emotional way, it's like it just sort of is words, right? You're like,
Yeah.
you're going to launch this amazing product and it's going to be great and everyone's going to love it. And blah, blah, blah. Like, we've all been around founders like that where they're saying the right things, but for some reason it doesn't feel right. And so when people really can tap into their feelings and other people's, and like you're talking about, read the room, their communication comes from a much more genuine, connected place. So it's a little less, I think oftentimes these sorts of communication conversations or trainings are like, these are the exact things you need to be saying, but there's no one kind of leader. Like the kind of leader that you're going to be, or I'm going to be, or these, other tech founders that you're talking about, they have their own type of leader that they need to be that's really genuine and authentic to them. If they don't know how they're feeling, there's no way for them to get in touch with it. And there's no way for their teams, their potential investors, their potential customers to really like connect with them because we really connect with people emotionally more than anything.
Yeah. Um, I want to give you maybe a story, a scenario, and I would love to get your feedback on this. So I was working with a founder a long time ago. I noticed that what she was doing, she was putting everything under the rug. I kept telling her some issues, in the company, in the product, direct feedbacks coming from the customers, potential customers, but she did not listen to that part because she had this arrogance that no, my product is the best product, and you don't know how to communicate to your customers or you don't know how to sell it. So ultimately, the startup failed, and again, it didn't fail because of me, but what I learned from the experience, that when you start putting stuff under the rug, that means that you are weak in handling the conflict. And one of the things which I learned in life, that because I was very weak in handling conflicts. But if you somehow know how to resolve conflicts without losing people, I think that you have amazing skill where you can take your company from zero to next level really fast. So I want to talk to you about, under the same umbrella of communication and emotional intelligence, the conflict resolution. Do you what is your take on handling conflicts? Or something important to me, sometimes I create conflicts intentionally between people to understand where do they sit and how far they can go when it comes to helping customers. What's your take on it?
I mean, I think you just said like five different things.
Yeah, I know. Pick
I
one.
mean, to go back just for a second to the founder,
Yeah.
and then we can connect this to conflict. So the founder might have had an issue with conflict, and they might have also had an issue with fear. And a lot of times with arrogance, we see like avoidance of fear. And so if I don't hear about it and I don't deal with it, then I don't have to feel that fear, like, oh God, this is going to take us down and I'm going to be a failure and all of the things that people think. So it's much better to just push it under the rug. So sometimes it's not even that like arrogance is the thing. Arrogance is like the symptom of the thing, which is their inability to feel a certain emotion. And so we see the same thing with conflict resolution is if they're not able to feel feelings of anger and to be able to be comfortable in the conflict, and there's really good reasons for that. Like if your parents fought a lot as a kid, or if you were in certain situations where like anger was very scary, or maybe you're just that way, like it can trigger people, it can freak them out, whatever reason. If you can't be comfortable in that conflict, you're either gonna go in hard and fast and try to like shut it down with one big swipe, or you're gonna avoid it. Or when you get in it, you're gonna be super uncomfortable, you're gonna freak out and not really be able to think super clearly. So if you're trying to get into like a situation that requires conflict, you need to be able to like enter into it at the appropriate time and stay in it for as long as necessary. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, yeah. You know, easy way to find quick shortcuts to escape the conflict, because we all want to get into our comfort zone. But, it's like a wound, right? If you don't treat it, it's going to keep popping up and you're ultimately going to lose some part of your body. So the same way, um, going back to the story which I was sharing, startup failed because multiple incidents happened where the conflict was there, but this person didn't know how to handle it. Yeah. Andrew, that actually brings up to the ending of this show. Ending of this episode, I wanted to talk to you about the practical tips. Sure, we took broad strokes. We talked about emotional intelligence, empathy, communication, and conflict piece. But I think if we just take one step back and take one thing away from this episode, how can I, just me sitting here after this episode, how can I just detach myself from everything and start following some tips where I can just say, you know what? Now I know what I need to do next to improve my relationship with my coworkers.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that naming your emotions in 2, 3 minutes a day is the best thing that you can do. So, phase one, do that. Phase two, notice what emotions you're not feeling. Phase three will be, can I notice those emotions as they come up? And that usually takes a month or two to be able to get there. So we can say, like, I'm starting to get irritated with this person, and I'm noticing myself starting to react in a certain way, instead of like, oh, I notice I'm feeling irritated. I wonder what that's about. Let me lean in and let me like start to engage a little more and let me try to find out, instead of judging you, pulling away, and starting to like degrade our relationship, right? Like whenever you feel yourself start to pull away, you can lean back in, but you have to recognize that emotion for that process to start to turn around, right? So those are the three things I would do: naming your emotions, noticing the ones you're not feeling. When people talk about like know your blind spots, your emotional blind spots are one of the biggest parts of that. And so this is how you do that. Basically, when you notice there's a whole area of my emotions I'm not writing down, I'm not noticing I'm feeling, those are your emotional blind spots. And then you can start to notice in the moment what's happening and then what do I do about it? So
Yeah.
I would say don't be afraid to like lean in when you feel like the relationship is creating more distance. Lean in, get closer, and then see what happens.
And I believe we mentioned awesomeinstitute.com/emotions, right?
Yeah, you can download a sheet and a
Yeah.
process on even how to feel your emotions there.
And the reason I said this because you brought up something very important. emotional blind spot. You know, if you never heard of it, you will never know. And I think that sheet which you just mentioned, personally, it will help me a lot because there's so many other emotions. I just don't know how to label that feeling which is coming from my stomach or from my heart or from my head. I just don't know how to label it, right? And if I don't know how to label it, I won't be able to communicate back to you. Yeah, very good point.
Right, right.
Yeah. So, Andre, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can send me an email, Andrea@awesomeinstitute.com. You can check out stuff on our website, Instagram. I'm at AT Garfield. We have a bunch of videos about all this stuff. Whatever people want to do. I'm here. Like to have a lot of free resources and things so that people can get the right amount of help for whatever stage that they're at.
Very nice. So, are you okay if I share your email ID into the description of this episode?
Yeah, of course. Of
Okay,
course.
awesome. Yeah, Andrea, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to. I think this time I'm looking forward to have a dinner with you and maybe grab a couple of drinks.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great. Thanks so much for
All right.
having me. It's been really fun.
Yes, thank you so much.